Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more about my offerings at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. I also have a Facebook page of the same name and the daily inspiration email blast where you will get an inspiring email from me every weekday. You can sign up for that at my website. And I want to welcome you here. Thank you so much for listening. I'm honored to get to spend this time with you. And I also wanted to put in a small request. If you are enjoying this podcast, if it is helping you to feel more centered, if it is helping you to rest, if you would consider leaving a review or a rating on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify, I would greatly appreciate it. We are growing the podcast through word of mouth. So anything you can do to spread the word would truly be a blessing. But for now, it's time to rest. I am cozied up under my blanket fort. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that I pull a blanket over my head as I record the podcast for you. It helps to dampen the sound, but it's also wound up being this place of sanctuary. You know, when I come into the blanket fort, I feel the energies start to shift. The love flows in. And I will also say my inner child is delighted. I've always been someone who likes pulling the blankets over my head. I know that that can be a metaphor for opting out for life, but that's not how I mean it right now. I've just always, ever since I was a little kid, loved cocooning in bed. When I was little, I would tuck in the comforter really tight on all sides. So it'd be this tight envelope and I would shimmy my way in. This was way before the days of weighted blankets. And I was a kid, right? So I didn't necessarily get to choose my bedding. It was what my mom had bought for us. But I remember everything had to be tucked in super tight. The tighter, the better. And I would just shimmy in to the blankets with my stuffed animals, and I would feel so safe and cozy. And nowadays I have big comforters on the bed and lots of pillows, and I just love getting to pull the blankets over my head. And then I go to sleep. So having the blanket fort right now sort of mirrors that wonderful, cozy, sacred, restful space that I love so much and that I get to share with you. You beautiful big soul that you are. I'm so deeply grateful for the gift of you. And as we gather together here, I'm asking the angels to bring forward waves of love for you. I love the ritual of calling the angels in, and so I'm going to do that now for us. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and out, and just let yourself get comfortable in your body to the best of your ability. And I'm going to ask the angels to join us, even though they are already here. Beautiful angels on high, I feel the love you are transmitting for this broadcast, and we are so deeply grateful. I ask that you join us here, and I ask that you ripple love to all who are tuning in to this message. I ask that you help to clear our energy fields of anything that does not belong to us, anything heavy or burdensome that we need not carry, because to us it might feel very weighty, and to you it will feel as light as a feather. So helping to clear our path that we may walk boldly upon this earth. Help each one of us awaken to the brightness of our truth, the sweetness of our spirit. Help to bring forward resources, grace, ease, and healing in ways that are in alignment with our highest and best good. And dear ones, just take a nice deep breath in, coming into this loving, sweet space that is being created for you. The angels are filled with so much love for you. You truly are a beautiful soul. And we are so grateful for this opportunity to love and support you. And just breathe. I know you breathe all the time, otherwise you would not be here. But when the invitation comes forward to breathe, it is that intentional centering breath. Don't worry about doing it right. You can't do it incorrectly. Just focus on your breath for a second. And allow for waves of relaxation to move through you. This world is better because you are here. Your life is creating ripples of love and goodness in this world, even if you are not sure how that is happening. I affirm that it is. And I affirm that blessings and maybe some miracles are being sprinkled upon your path. And that sparks of inspiration are coming your way. I'm a huge fan of sparks of inspiration. I love co-creating from an inspired space. I love that I could wake up on an ordinary day, not really knowing where I'm going, or I'll just be doing my ordinary routine. And then all of a sudden, at like 10:37, a wave of inspiration drops in for me, a spark, a beautiful spark, and my consciousness connects with it. And then it starts blossoming open, and an inner conversation starts happening, and all of a sudden, something that wasn't there half an hour before has now started to germinate within. And that's how I think of sparks of inspiration. I don't always have them, and I will say sometimes when there's the absence of them, I feel bereft. I feel unplugged. I feel like life's a bit harder. Like I don't know what to do. That's often a conversation I have with my husband. I don't know what to do. And it's because my intellect, I can always plan something. Listen, it's not that I lack ideas, but usually when I say I don't know what to do, I mean I'm not feeling guided from my deep knowingness where those sparks of inspiration reside. So, my friends, here's to calling forward more sparks of inspiration for us all. As some of you know, this podcast was born from a spark of inspiration that spoke to me for several months before I took action on it. So here's to sparks of inspiration that will delight you and maybe even delight others too. Here's to opening up to your magic, to your gifts, to that which brings you deep, abiding joy and purpose. Just take a deep breath in and release. And you go ahead and cozy on up and snuggle on in. And while you do, I'm going to tell you a story. So, for our story, I'm going to share with you about my love of soap operas. Now, if you don't like soap operas, I promise there will still be something interesting in this story for you, because while it might seem on the surface that I'm talking to you about soaps, I'm also going to share with you about disappointment and the paths that we hope will open up that sometimes don't, and some other interesting experiences that I had along this path. So there's going to be a lot wrapped up in this story time for you. So let's start off with soaps. The first soap I ever started watching was in the late 70s. And it was Ryan's Hope. Ryan's Hope was a 30-minute soap on ABC about a working class Irish family, the Ryans, who owned a bar in New York. And I don't remember why I chose into that soap. I must have had friends who were watching it, but I started watching that one. And then I got hooked on the whole ABC block. That included All My Children, One Life to Live, and General Hospital. At some point in those years, Ryan's Hope got canceled. And I shared this with you in a previous podcast, but it's worth mentioning again that the VCR, the home video cassette recorder, did not really become a household item until somewhere around 1982, somewhere in the early 80s. So for those of you who are young, you might not remember what it was like then, but at that point, before VCRs were common in our homes, you actually had to sit in front of the television and watch your program when it aired live. So being beholden to 3.5 hours of soaps was really intense. And I didn't necessarily feel like I had to watch All My Children and One Life to Live. But for me, General Hospital was non-negotiable. This was the heyday of Luke and Laura. The summer that they were on the run from Frank Smith, They went to Beecher's Corners. They were looking for the left-handed boy, and I could not miss it. So for much of my college experience, I would not take a class that was at 2:00 because that was when General Hospital was on. So who knows what I could have become had I opened my life to 2:00 classes in college. I remember the day of Luke and Laura's wedding, which is a very iconic episode in the world of soaps. I ran to the student union. I was at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois, and I ran to the student union to watch the wedding. And the thing about soaps that I grew to love so much was that the stories never ended. I have always loved the opportunity to be in relationship to characters for a long time. I have an active imagination. I'm a perpetual daydreamer. You know, when a book or a movie ends, sometimes it keeps playing out in my imagination. And I love having relationships with characters for a long time. I think it's such a cool experience. And so I think that's what drew me into soaps. And I have always been someone who loves drama. As I've grown older, I don't like drama in my own life, but I'm always up for a great dramatic story. You know, watching someone else go through drama can be appealing. So I was an avid soap watcher. Somewhere around 1982, our family got our first VCR. We got a Betamax. If anyone was into the format wars at the time, there was the VHS and the Betamax, and we went Betamax because I heard that was the superior format. And once we had the VCR, I could record General Hospital. And it also happened that right around that time, I switched from the college that I was going to Columbia College in Chicago, which was a fine arts school, and I was living at home with my parents, so I had access to a VCR. So now I could take classes at 2:00, and life opened up for me. So I always loved the soaps, and I don't know that I dreamed about working in them, but certainly that would have been super cool, and that's part of where this story is going to take us. So I loved the soaps. And this is where I'm going to be weaving in another theme here. You know, on the journey of self-growth and spirituality and New Age wisdom, we often talk about law of attraction and your thoughts create your reality and manifesting and all of those delightful, magical experiences we seek to have. And I think that they're wonderful tools, but I don't feel that they are always the tools we need in our toolbox. I don't think that they always work. I know they don't always work, right? I mean, and I'm 60 years old, and not everything that I have wanted in my life has come to pass. I mean, that's just how life is, right? It's not because I wasn't a vibrational match, and it's not because my thoughts weren't good. I think there's a randomness to life. I think life has its own rhythm, and sometimes we just have to adapt to what is. And so I promise this is going to weave into the topic of my love of soaps. So back in the late 80s, I had shared with you already in other podcasts, I was working for a film company, the Samuel Goldwyn Company, and I wasn't happy there. I didn't get along with my boss, and I just was really out of sorts, and I wanted to earn more money. I think I had shared with you in another podcast, I wanted to earn $30,000, which was a lot of money back then. I had started going back for my MBA and had a metaphysical experience and decided that wasn't for me. Then I started reading all the Louise Hay stuff, right? And all, the early metaphysics from the 80s. Not that that was early metaphysics, that started way before, but the start of our latest wave of New Age wisdom sort of started in the late 80s. And a friend of mine had gotten a really good job through an employment agency. And so I thought, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to register with this employment agency. And so I went, and my clerical skills were really good at the time. I typed over 60 words a minute. I had learned to use a word processor, which was very newfangled technology at the time. And so I was a good candidate to be placed for some kind of executive assistant position in the entertainment industry, which was really what I was hoping for. So the woman who was my contact at the agency calls me and says, there's a job open for the executive assistant of the head writer of the soap opera Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara was an NBC soap. It wasn't one of the more popular soaps, but it definitely had a big following. It wasn't one of the soaps I watched, but it was a soap on a network. And this was a position for an executive assistant to the head writer. Like, this was my golden pass to what I had hoped might happen someday. So I went for the first interview, and the person interviewing me liked me quite a bit and moved me on to the next round of interviews. So the next round of interviews was with the head writer, who I would be the assistant of, who was Charles Pratt Jr. Listen, I don't know the man, so this is not me spilling any tea, but I just wanted to mention his name because a few years after having the position of head writer at Santa Barbara, he went on to, I think, produce or write for Beverly Hills 90210. So there was a trajectory there happening. So I had a great interview with him. It was one of those interviews where he talked in a way that I thought I already had the job. For instance, he said things like, "Oh, I can tell already that the actors are going to love you." He didn't say the actors would love you. He said the actors are going to love you. Your office is going to be where they go get coffee. Not that you're going to have to make the coffee, but they often talk to the person in the writer's office, and I can already tell they're going to love you. And I left that interview feeling really good about the job. I thought, I'm going to get this job. And I was reading the Louise Hay books, right? I'm doing my affirmations and my manifesting and my prayer work. And about a week and a half later, the person at the employment agency calls me up and she says, I don't know what happened, but they went with another candidate. You didn't get the job. And I was devastated. I was so disappointed to have flown that closely to the sun and not have gotten the job I didn't understand. And I received no feedback about why I didn't get the job. I remember the person at the employment agency calling the writer's office to try and get at some information, and she didn't have any feedback for me. A couple weeks later, I remember being in the car with my friends, and I had my folder of my resume and my cover letters and my thank you notes, and I showed a friend the thank you note that I had sent after my interview with Santa Barbara. And he pointed out that I used the wrong there in a sentence. So I don't remember which one I did, but I said either spelled Their or There. I used the wrong derivative of there in a sentence. And this was before we had autocorrect. And all I could think of was, oh my God, you know what? That probably put the kibosh on it for me, because how could I proofread scripts if I can't even use the right derivative of there? I don't know that that's actually what happened, but it's what makes the most sense to me. But here's why I want to talk to you about this experience, because we can do everything right. And maybe I made a mistake, but you understand what I mean, right? Prayers and affirmations, and it may seem like this is it. This is going to be my dream come true. My life has been leading up to this moment. And then it falls flat. And those moments are devastating. It took me a while to recover from that. I did wind up after that manifesting the job with Michael Nesmith, which I shared with you in another broadcast. He ran a video production company and a home video distribution company. And I wound up getting hired as his executive assistant. But for a long, long time, I struggled with the disappointment of not getting that job. And you know, we can't know really about the paths not taken. You know, in my fantasy, right, all I could do was fill in the blanks with my imagination. In my imagination, I would have done amazing at that job and maybe become a writer for soaps and maybe gone on to do bigger things with networks, and my life would have been very different. But I don't know that that's the case. I don't really know what would have happened if I'd used the right derivative of there, if that indeed was the issue, if I had gotten that job, what would have happened. But I suspect I would be living a very different life than the one that I have now. And when I go to connect all the dots, I think, well, I went to work for Michael, and that led to my career in marketing, and that led me to work for SoundScan and VideoScan, and that led me to move to New York, which led me back to LA, which led me to Nielsen, which led me to unhappiness. And it was my unhappiness that led me to the University of Santa Monica, which started my spiritual journey in earnest. So I don't know, it's one of those sliding doors analogies, right? Had that job come to me, would I even be talking to you right now? I'm not saying that that's why I didn't get the job. I just want to share that story with you because I know sometimes when I weave these tales, it sounds like, oh my God, everything I've ever wanted has come to me. I don't mean to make that sound so grand, but I love what I do for a living. I love my work. I'm in a happy marriage. A lot of my dreams, these dreams, I'm living for sure. But I also think it hasn't been a straight line that got me here. There've been a lot of zigs and zags, and there have been dreams that did not come to fruition. I feel deeply fulfilled in my life now. And when I look back at what got me here, I just have a sense of profound compassion for those moments in my life when my dreams did not come true. And I bring this forward because I think when we work with these concepts like law of attraction and your thoughts create your reality and your vibration and all of that stuff, which are really good tools, but they don't necessarily mean that they always work. There is certainly a randomness to life. There's a great metaphor from the show A Good Place. I don't know how many of you watched it. It was such a great show. And there's this concept called Jeremy Bearimy. As I best recall, one of the characters was asking about how time works. And one of the head angels writes in big scrolling script, Jeremy Bearimy. So if you can just imagine the script, how it loops around. And they said, this is what time is like. Time is Jeremy Bearimy. So time doesn't go in a straight line, right? It loops around. It goes off the page. It skips and twirls. And I think that's what life is, right? So my experience with Santa Barbara, the soap, was a big Jeremy Bearimy, right? I was hoping that was going to be my destiny. Like that would make sense. Oh my God, it would have made so much sense that I would wind up in a career working on soap operas that I loved so much. And then it wasn't meant to be. And I had to find my way forward. And it's not that I found anything that felt even better. You know how they say this or something even better for the highest good of all concerned. It never felt like that was even better. My jobs that followed after that weren't like, oh, this is even better. Not for a really long time until I got into this line of work. And I don't even know that I ever felt that this was even better, but it was definitely its own bona fide parallel path of goodness and love. So I still have more to share, though, about soaps and my love of soaps and some cool experiences I had along the way. So one of the things I wanted to share with you that was so cool was one of the perks of living in Los Angeles was UCLA campus is in Los Angeles. And they had a great extension program where they had lots of classes that you could take without being enrolled in the university. So you could take classes in restaurant management, in architecture, in writing. And at one point, they had a class in writing for soap operas. Now, this was after my big Santa Barbara letdown. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to take this class. Maybe this class is going to help me get into writing for soaps. Because I didn't really know anything about how they were written other than what I saw on the screen. So some of what I'm going to share with you might be very interesting. So the woman who taught the class was a writer on General Hospital, right? So ding, 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 like, okay, I'm excited. She is working in proximity on GH, General Hospital. And I was going to have access to her and access to inside stories. And I was going to learn about how soap operas were written. So here's some of what I learned. There are different jobs within the writer's department. So the head writers look at the overall story arcs, right? So they might write a Bible for the next year. These are the story arcs that are going to happen. This is who's going to come together. This is who's going to get split up. These are going to be the major beats of their story. And so the main Bible, the main storyline is often charted about a year in advance. Now that can change, but that's typically how it works. And then I can't quite remember how all this works, so I may have this mixed up. So I am not speaking to you with any authority. This is based on a class that I took in the late 80s or early 90s, somewhere right around then. Okay, so there were the writers who did the big Bible and the overall story arcs. And then it would sort of get broken down by like months, like what are going to be the beats within the next month. And then there would be the breakdown writers who would plot out the scenes, but they weren't writing the dialogue at that point. They were sort of filling in the beats. And in the meantime, the kinds of things that had to be monitored were how often are the actors working? So if an actor has a guarantee that they will be on twice a week to make sure that they're going to have scenes twice a week, how all of that was going to be, organized. And then there were ultimately the daily script writers, which would take the breakdowns and then craft the dialogue. So there are a lot of phases to writing a soap. There's a lot of moving pieces. And one of the things that I thought was so cool was towards the end of the class, she had us write a scene. And she had a couple soap opera actors come in and act out our scenes. And one of the actors who came in was Ken Schreiner, who plays Scotty Baldwin on GH. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, that we got to have real life soap opera actors act out our scenes. I don't have any cool stories to share with you about that other than how delighted I was at that experience. And I learned a lot about how soaps were written. It really, I had really hoped that I would still work in soaps at that point, but it never happened. But I loved getting to take that class. And one of the things I will say, I guess I should add in here, I don't watch soaps anymore. First off, all my children and One Life to Live are no longer on the air. General Hospital is really the only soap that I had watched with any sort of continuity. It's still on the air, but honestly, I don't recognize many people on the screen anymore. They lost me a long time ago when a lot of the core families and the more storied actors left the canvas. I became much less interested. I just didn't really recognize that as my Port Charles, if that makes sense. For those of you who watch soaps, perhaps you will understand what I mean. And one of the things that has frustrated me with soaps over the years is it is very common for producers and writers to leave a show and then a new regime comes in. And the new regime comes in and they think they know what they need to do. And they start changing storylines, and sometimes for the good, for sure. But viewers can always tell when writers and producers come in with no loyalty to what has happened before. They'll kill off a character. Soaps have that great, they're known for, people coming back from the dead, which is crazy. But part of the reason for that is at some point, some writer made a stupid decision to kill off a core character that the viewers are invested in, that they love. And they think they're going to come in and kill off a character and raise the ratings. And honestly, most time the viewers, the audience, feels betrayed by that. So it's interesting, having watched a show for so many years. You see its peaks and valleys, right? A different writer comes in and they scramble the cast of characters and the storylines, and they don't stay loyal to what has made the soap so special. And I think ultimately that's one of the reasons that I strayed from General Hospital. First off, I just wasn't interested in having it take up an hour of my life anymore. And I felt that the storylines were no longer loyal to what I had come to love. And there was nothing in it that I felt that I wanted to engage with anymore. But I just find that interesting. I think that soap operas are an interesting, creative endeavor. You have characters who've been on screen for 40 years. Like, there's a whole life. These characters have lived decades in the hearts of their audience. And so I really believe that the writers and producers owe it to the audience to remain loyal. And so the audience will often know when a character is acting in a way that that character wouldn't act. It's interesting. It's a really interesting symbiosis between a soap opera and its audience. So let's see, what else can I share with you about soaps? So at one point in my life, I watched 3.5 hours of soaps, and now I don't watch any. But they made up a big part of my life. And I have tremendous love and respect for the format. And it's one of my key moments in my life of the road not traveled. And I just felt like I really wanted to share that story with you, because I think that there's this wonderful concept that I did not coin, but I love, called New Age guilt. We learn all of these amazing skills, right? You can heal your life. Your thoughts create your reality. Law of attraction. Affirmations. Asking the angels for help. And you guys know I love these tools. And it doesn't mean that they work all the time. There's a randomness to life. We don't get everything we want. I mean, that's a silly concept. Like, of course there's randomness to life. Of course there are dreams that don't come true. And it's hard and it's disappointing, because I think part of the thing that comes with opening to these concepts is giving voice to our dreams, which can be very vulnerable. You know, I can't remember if I've shared this with you before. I've certainly shared it while I was teaching, but one of the concepts they taught us in the early weeks of the University of Santa Monica was about writing ideal scenes. And the exercise was, in essence, giving voice to different parts of our life in a way that reflected what we really desired. And I remember the homework assignment was to go home and write 5 ideal scenes for 5 different parts of my life. And I just couldn't move forward on it, and I didn't understand why. And I called the student advisor, and we talked. And what I came to realize was I was comfortable asking for what I thought I could have, but giving voice to what I really wanted frightened me. Because there is profound vulnerability in opening or giving voice even to our truest desires, especially if we don't know if we can have them. So it's a risk. It's a risk to give voice to a big dream, right? Whether it's a dream of having your book published, a dream of finding your beloved, a dream of health, even if you are experiencing illness. There's a vulnerability to opening to what we want, because there will be those desires that do not come to fruition. Disappointment is a byproduct of a life well lived, right? I mean, it's like somebody who's, I wish I could remember the quote right now. It was from an ice skater who said that they lost count of how many times they fell trying to master a skill, right? Allowing ourselves to connect with the vibrancy and the vitality of our dreams means that, God willing, some of them will come to manifestation. And some of them may come to manifestation in watered down, changed form. And some of them may never be at all. And that's part of the reality that I think we learn to live with. I don't want to make it sound like I live with it gracefully. It's hard. Even now, if I announce a class and perhaps it is not met with the kind of enthusiasm I thought it would, it's hard. I don't handle that very gracefully. All my thoughts go to, what am I doing wrong? What did I do wrong? Right? That voice that shows up, right? Like, what was my responsibility here? And so, you guys, life comes with disappointment, and that's okay. Don't get down on yourself. It just means we tried, right? We tried for the high jump and knocked the pole down. It happens to all of us. The blessing of living a long life means we've had a lot of different experiences. We've had highs and we've had lows and we've had Jeremy Baramy in between. Life is long. And so I really do my best to focus on resiliency of spirit. So when something falls flat, or when something disappoints me, I do my best to meet myself in a place of compassion. And then I look for the bright spot on the horizon. So I just wanted to really share this story with you. First off, I wanted to share with you about my love of soaps as just a story time. But I also wanted you to know that not every moment of my life has felt magical. I have navigated some deep disappointment in my life, just like you have. That's the human journey. We have moments when it feels like life is singing, and then we have moments where it feels like life is not flowing in our favor. Through it all, we're loved, though. I believe in resiliency. My hope is always for resiliency. I look to nature for that, right? how the flowers just seem to know how to blossom when they need to. I think that life force is within us as well. And even though I didn't get to live out my dream of working in the soaps, even though I flew close to the sun, life brought me a really glorious and beautiful path that I am deeply, deeply grateful for. Truly, there were a couple dreams there that I was going for that had they happened, I would not be here with you right now. Another one that I'll sort of slip in under the wire was, so probably the year before I wound up going to USM, I was contemplating buying a condo in Culver City, and I was really close to putting in an offer. But I felt like I needed a little more money for the down payment, and I wasn't able to rally the extra money. I could have moved forward with it, but I felt like it wouldn't leave me with much of a cushion. So I decided to pull back. And then I had deep regret about that because the market took off and the condo I would have purchased easily went up by $100,000 in like 6 months. And by that point, I was priced out of the market. So I had deep regret about that. But you know what? When I go back and look at that, had I gotten that condo, I would have never gone to USM. Because the reason I could so easily say yes to USM was because I wasn't paying on a mortgage and I had the extra discretionary income to say yes to that opportunity. So it's so interesting when we connect the dots. Like, how did I get here in this moment in my blanket fort with you? Well, I didn't wind up working for a soap opera, and I didn't buy the condo in Culver City, and probably thousands of other moments that I cannot contemplate right now. But it brought me here now. And I love the adage, the moment of power is now. There's a liberation in that, right? That this is who I am now. I am Laurel now, in this moment with you. And I believe the horizon is dotted with beautiful, bright opportunities for me and for you. So, a life well lived includes lots of Jeremy Bearimy moments, borrowing from The Good Place. It will have pockets of deep disappointment and heartache. And God willing, it's going to have many, many moments of blessings and joy and goodness and light. And so in some ways, we are all living our own soap opera, right? We're living the drama. We're living the joy. We're living the love. We're living all of it. That's life. All of it. It's all here for us. So, you be you. You are wonderful just as you are. And my hope is there are gorgeous, beautiful, bright moments just waiting for you when you wake up and in the days and weeks and months and years ahead. We'll focus on the brightness and we'll put our energy into the things that we find fulfilling, that we can easily connect with. So thank you for letting me share this rambling story that seems like it might not be connected, but it is, because everything's always connected. So I love you. I'm going to ask the angels too, while we're here, to ask them to clear out energies of disappointment for us all, to clear our timelines of any old waves of disappointment, just transmuting them into light so that we can come into a lightness of spirit that we can connect with the brightness of our hearts and of our destinies. Feel the goodness calling to us now. Thank you, angels. Thank you, angels, for helping us with this. So, dear ones, you rest. I wish you sweet dreams. I wish you goodness and light. And we'll talk again soon.